Okay, what are you saying, people, and welcome back to my channel. Now today on the weekly Forex analysis for you guys. So on the screen are the pairs we'll be looking at today, but make sure you stay to the end of the video because I will be going into depth analysis about what's happened during this week's trading week and potentially what could be happening during next week's trading week. So make sure you stay to the end of the video for all of that. Before that said, guys, let's just get straight into it. First up, we've got Euro USD. Okay, so for Euro USD this week, as you can see, we did see some bearish momentum come into the market, so a slight dip in price to the downside there. We did have this key level in the market holding as support. However, since we're now trading below it, we'll be now acting as resistance again. You can see if we do look left, resistance there, resistance there, resistance there as well. Big dip to the downside, and now we'll be acting as resistance there again. So for next week, as long as we keep that up, keep rejecting that level as resistance, that resistance does stay intact. I'm favouring another move to the downside. You can see we're starting to get some bearish structure here in the market now. We've had this push from here, giving us a low, lower high, new lower low. So potentially could be rolling over to the downside. I'm not saying we're getting a reversal, but we might be seeing a bit of a counter trend move to the downside. We do have this key level here around 1.20600. Very key level of support and resistance, resistance support, and this was kind of like our major swing low of the market. So I do think there's a good chance if we do keep that up as resistance, we can roll over, come and test this area, and then see a bigger move to the upside, potentially, and have Euro USD on its way back to 1.23, because I still do believe Euro USD is on its way up, but again, that's a long-term bias, and this is our short-term analysis for this week. So the next week, we'll be looking for shorting opportunities since we're holding back below this area, and we'll be seeing if we can get some nice shorts from around here, targeting this new low here. If we do start breaking above this area and start holding as support, then we'll look to change my bias and see if we can get some nice long opportunities. But as of right now, you can see we're slightly turning bearish, and we're back below that key level of resistance. So as long as we're back below that, we'll be looking for those sells targeting that 1.20600 level for next week. Next, we're going to take a look at USD JPY. Okay, so for USD JPY, not too much has happened this week. As you can see, overall price action is just kind of moving sideways over the past few days. We really haven't gone anywhere. You can see on the daily, we are in a bullish structure here. Prices pushed up, pull back, push, pull back. We're making higher highs and higher lows. So taking that information down into the 4H, you can see we do have this trend line here, which price has tested a couple times and is now rejecting. So I think potentially we might just be seeing price push back down to this trend line, and potentially we'll see another push to the upside back into that same resistance there. Or on the flip side, we could potentially break through the trend line, and if we do that, then potentially we could be turning bearish and seeing a more bearish momentum come to the markets, and potentially a reversal on the daily. So those were the two options there for USD JPY. Currently, we are still pushing to the outside, making higher highs, higher lows. We did see quite a lot of bearish momentum come to the market on Friday there. Again, that was NFP taking us to the downside. So I do think potentially we might be seeing a bit of retracement of that and maybe fall over to the downside, test this trend line. Then from here, we'll make our judgment whether we are rejecting it. Then we can see another push to the upside, maybe create a higher high. Or if we're far too strong, far too bearish, breaking through, and then potentially could change our bias and look for selling opportunities, aiming for this area here. And then if we break through that as well, then the support just underneath it, and then potentially even the lows down there, but that is probably for a couple of weeks time. So USD JPY, I think we'll probably roll over to the downside again, and if you do reject this trend line, we'll probably see another push to the upside. But if you break through, can change our bias to bearish and see a bigger move to the downside. And next we've got USD CAD. Okay, so now we've got USD CAD. So you can see for this pair, we are still very, very bearish on the daily. Price still making lower lows, lower highs. We are starting to run out a bit of that bearish momentum. As you can see, we're starting to slow down. You can see if I drop to the 4H, we do have a bit of this sideways price action here. Clear level of support just below us, and also clear level of resistance just above us. I did say last week, if you do tap back into this resistance, do look for some selling opportunities, because there's a good chance it will probably reject from that area. And as you can see, we are rejecting that area, and we're kind of midway falling to the downside. So I do think for next week, we'll see a continuation of that bearish momentum coming into this level again. And if we do reject that support, which is done a couple times before, we'll probably see another swing to the upside and just continue that range. Unless we do see a breakout, in that case, if we do see a break to the upside, then we'll be looking to target this resistance here in the market. Again, don't want to be getting too overly confident or too aggressive with buys for USD CAD. Just because of how bearish we are. Unless we start to see a big break of structure and start to trend to the upside, then we can be a bit more confident with our buys. But overall, USD CAD is still very bearish. So if you do break to the upside, I do think this this target of resistance is probably where price will go. And if you do break to the downside, then we just see a continuation of the overall bearish trend in the market, because again, higher time frame still pointing to the downside, so we just see a continuation of that. But right now, USD CAD is still moving sideways. I'm expecting to see a continuation to the downside to start the week off. Then from here, if we do bounce, can look to capitalize on some buying opportunities and just take advantage of that range back into that resistance, unless we see a breakout to the downside, which then again can take the break and retest entry and look to carry that further. Or if we break to the upside, can take the break and retest entry again and see if you can get a move back into around 1.22 area. Up next is Euro GBP. Sorry to interrupt the video, guys, but if you are enjoying the content and you find it useful, make sure you go hit the subscribe button down below, and also make sure you drop a like as well. It really does help the channel out. But anyway, back to the video. And now onto Euro GBP. So you can see for this pair for the past few days, it is very, very choppy. However, last week we did expect to see a bit of retracement come into this week and see a continuation to the downside. So this move here was just retracement, tap back into a nice area of resistance, and then as you can see, we did fall over to the downside quite nicely. So overall, Euro GBP is still very bearish in my opinion. We do have this trend line here, which is kind of keeping price trending to the downside, and we do also have this support here as well. And I do think we could potentially break to the downside again for Euro GBP past this support and maybe make our way into this level here, or maybe even back into these lows all the way down there. So Euro GBP still bearish market. You can still see we're making lower lows, lower highs here. Not really lower lows because we're struggling to break past that support, but we are still making lower highs. And I do think we'll probably see a continuation of that, the price kind of consolidate between the trend line and that support. And if you do see a break of that support, can look to take that a lot lower to the downside. If you do get a break of the trend line, then potentially probably see a reversal, but right now I'm still favoring more downside for Euro GBP. So for next week, if you do see a nice push to the upside, I think it's just another opportunity to look to sell. You can look to sell up the trend line or maybe a resistance nearby, and then look to target the support again. And if you do get a break, then look to target around the 0.85 400 mark. Okay, so up next we've got AUD USD. Okay, so next we've got AUD USD. So you can see for this pair we had a bit of a dive to the downside this week with that strong bearish candle. Then the NFP did take us back above. So price is slightly bearish, although it's just moving sideways and hasn't really gone anywhere. You can still see we are pushing to the downside. We've got this bearish trend line here in the market. And as you can see, we are making lower highs here as well. So if I just highlight that area, so first, the second, third, and potentially could be seeing a fourth as well. So price overall is slightly bearish, even though we are kind of in a consolidation. And I do think for next week we'll probably see a slight push to the upside, then price roll back down to 0.77 and retest that support. And we might see a bit of consolidation between that trend line and that support until one breaks or one gives way. If you break to the upside, break past that trend line, give us some new highs, then potentially you could see the start of a bullish trend again and see price maybe push back to these highs up there. If we don't and we keep up this bearish structure, then there's a good chance we'll probably see price break through that 0.77 support and see that continuation lower, maybe back down to 0.76. So overall price is still bearish, still pushing to the downside, and I think for next week probably see a little bit of continuation to the upside, then see price kind of fall back over again and just keep that bearish structure unless we break through that trend line. So I think we're just going to see another rollover back to the downside, back down to 0.77, and if you break through that, it can go a lot further, but I'm not too sure if that's going to happen yet. But right now I think we should roll back over, back down to 0.77 and see a bit of a range between that trend line and that support. Now let's take a look at NZD CAD. Okay, so for NZD CAD this week, as you can see, we did roll over to the downside back into these lows here, and price was looking quite bearish throughout this week, pretty much for NZD CAD. We do have this key support here, which we were looking for a bit of a bounce to the upside. However, that did not happen. We did see a brief bounce on the lower time frames, but again, price didn't really kick off from that area. It eventually broke through and did roll over back into these lows down here. I did say if price was to get here, it will be a nice area to look to buy again and see if you can catch a move to the upside. So far that move is still continuing to the upside, and I do think we can come and test that daily level there. And either two things will happen: probably roll back down to the lows again, or if we do see a breakout and get back above, start holding this as support, then could be looking for some buys again and targeting this previous high up here. So two ideas there for NZD CAD. Again, not too sure which one will happen because the daily chart is still very bearish here, still making lower lows, lower highs. So there is still a good chance that price wants to roll back over and just see a continuation to the downside. In that case, we'll probably reject that daily key level, but we have to take into account that we're at a very key level of support, which, as you can see if I highlight this area now, we did see a big push to the upside from, and do expect to see not as necessarily the same push, as big as push as we had before, but to see a slight push to the upside, maybe pushing back into these levels up there, and see a bit more retracement for NZD CAD. So I do think we're coming to a very key level of weekly support. So I do think there's a good chance we can break above this area, and if we do that, then we can be looking for buys on that support and see if we can target that previous structure up there. But if we don't and we reject this level, can we look for shorts and just carry it back down to those lows. Next up, we've got GBP NZD. Okay, so for GBP NZD this week, as you can see, we had a bit of a move to the upside back into our key level of daily resistance here, which is around 1.97500. And the 4H, I was actually looking for a move to the downside this week for GBP/USD from this level. We did see a brief push, however, price didn't really kick off and actually went and broke through that level and saw a push back into that daily zone. So we are coming back into as support. So I do think for next week we might be seeing a push to the upside to start the week off. Then could see a bit of a range between those two levels there, depending if price wants to break through them. If we do see a break through that support, then can be looking for selling opportunities and change our buys to sells. Looking for a push to this level first, this recent swing low, and if you break through that to this swing low down there. So it would be this target will be the second target, and this will be the first. But of course, we do need to break through that, and on the retest, we can look for entries to take this lower first, the second target. But initially, we are coming into this level as support. So again, monitor price action there. If prices are rejecting that area, we're seeing some wicks, prices giving us a nice bullish price action. Can look for buys, and if that does hold, then we can look to target back at that resistance there. Then probably want to be taking profit around that level. Next, we're going to move on to CAD JPY. Okay, so next we've got CAD JPY, which this week not too much happened. As you can see, practically just moving sideways. And you can see why, because we're coming up to that key level of weekly resistance. So if I just take you across here, you can see really nice area of resistance where we had this double top, 1, 2, big dump to the downside, and we're coming back into that same area now, as you can see. So taking that information down to the daily, you can see why we're having such a hard time trying to push through that level. Onto the 4H, you can see we've already had 3 attempts, 1, 2, 3, trying to break through this. However, really having a hard time, and looks like we could be rolling over into a slightly bearish market, maybe a bit of a counter trend move to the downside, because CAD JPY is still very, very bullish, and it can still break through this weekly resistance. But right now, looking at this price action, looks like price wants to have a move to the downside first before maybe testing at that resistance again, trying to break through it. So for next week, looking for selling opportunities. First, want to see a bit of retracement. Don't really want to sell it now after that big move. Want to see some retracement, and then look to target these lows here around 90, key area of support and demand as well. We really did take off to the upside. So CAD JPY for next week, looking for some retracement first. Will be nice back into this area here, price support now resistance, and look to take it lower back into that 90 area for next week. Up next is GBP USD. Okay, so for GBP USD, not too much has happened this week. As you can see, again, practically price is just moving sideways, nothing much really going on there. And you can see why, because we're at a really strong area of resistance, big move to the downside previously, and now we're having a hard time to break through that area again. So there's a good chance that we might take a dive to the downside first, and then have another push to the upside to try and break through that area again, because right now it does look like price is rejecting that same area. Taking that information back down to the 4H, you can see clear level of resistance and support, giving us a really nice range. And for next week, I think we'll probably roll over to the downside again and see another test of that support. If we hold on to it, then we might see another reaction to the upside. But again, it does look like we'll probably roll to the downside there on the daily. So won't be too confident on these buys or look to hold them for too long. Best case scenario, probably see another move back into that resistance there. But if we don't, we could actually see a break to the downside, a retest, and a continuation lower. And at that point, we can look to target this support down here for GBP USD, which is around 1.40200. So for next week, expecting price to roll over back into this area. And again, monitor price action, see if we're getting confirmation, see if price is rejecting it. If it is, can look for buys targeting this resistance here or that resistance just above. If we don't, and price is still very bearish, can look for the break and retest entry, and look to take that lower back into this key support. And next we're going to see what's happening with GBP CAD. Okay, so now we've got GBP CAD. So you can see for this pair, we are still very much moving sideways. Price hasn't really moved anywhere for the past few weeks now. I do still favour a move to the downside. We do have this key level of support, which is still intact, which is now going to be acting resistance. So for next week, I am favouring a move to the downside. We are looking quite bearish here. Maybe a break of this counter trend line will probably take us to the downside. And then you can look for selling opportunities on the retracement. But if you do still push the upside back into 1.72, which is that daily area of support now acting as resistance, we'll be looking for selling opportunities around here and see if we can capitalize on that bigger move to the downside. And if it does play out, we'll be looking to target these lows back down around 1.68600, potentially even further, because we still do have that bearish structure on that daily time frame. So overall bias for GBCAD is to the downside. I was favouring a move to the downside for this week. However, all we got this week was basically just retracement. So yeah, looking for a move to the downside again this week. If we do see that retracement continue, we'll look to go short from around 1.72. However, if we see a nice strong break of that counter trend line, then look to take a short on that retracement. And first target will be this support here, which is obviously that previous low. And if we break through that, we'll be looking to target this low all the way down there around 1.68600. Okay, up next we've got GBP JPY. Okay, so for pound JPY this week, as you can see, we're having a bit of retracement this week, which was expected after that big push to the upside we had a couple of weeks ago. On the 4H, you can see that bearish structure a little bit clearer. So we have that push to the downside, forming that low, lower high, lower low, lower high. Now we're looking for a new lower low around this area of demand here, around 154, and then potentially could see that bullish trend continue to the upside if we do get to that area. So pound JPY looking for selling opportunities as long as we keep up that bearish structure. We also do have this trend line here as well, so as long as price doesn't go and break through this trend line next week, so if that does happen, then probably look to change the bias and look to keep pound JPY keep going in that bullish trend that we're seeing on the higher time frames. But as long as we don't, we obey that structure, looking for a pullback potentially into that trend line or into price support, now resistance, and we'll be looking to target that 154 area. And if we do get some nice confirmations, can look to buy from that area as well and look to take that higher back to highs as well. So for next week, expecting pound JPY to roll over to the downside back into 154. Then from here, can be looking to go long, targeting those highs again. And up next, we're going to take a look at gold. Okay, so for gold this week, we took a bit of a dive to the downside after slowly climbing higher. And as you can see, we came into this very strong area of supply, had a nice reaction to it and a nice bearish push to the downside, giving us a bearish closure on Thursday. And we also came into this 1860 level on Friday, and the NFP helped push this higher. So very key level here. See support, 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 support. Actually gave us this big push to the upside where we reached that 1950 level, which is where I'm expecting price to go to in the next coming weeks. This 1950 level up here. But again, I think we'll probably see a bit of retracement, well, a bit more retracement first before that happens, because you can see with this structure here, we're still kind of bearish here. Looks like last week we had a bit of a head and shoulders here, and we did collapse to the downside. So I do think the market might push sharp, give us another lower high, and then fall to the downside again. And if it does keep up that price action, can look to get long again from this support, and we'll see if we can capitalize on a nice move to the upside. But right now, gold for me, not really looking to buy it after that big push. We'll want to wait to see if gold can come back and retest this area and then look to go long. But next week for gold, I think we'll probably roll over again and look to target this 1860 level, and then from there we can look to go long, change our bias and see if we can get a bigger push to the upside. And last but not least, we've got Bitcoin. So for Bitcoin this week, not too much has happened. We still have that key support 30,000, which I do still feel like price can go and test. Overall price for Bitcoin is still sideways, as you can see, haven't really gone anywhere, and we do have that key resistance just above us around 40,000 as well. If you go into the 4H, you can still see we are forming lower highs in the market. So there's a major high there, another major high as well, and you can see we are forming lower highs. So I do feel like the market is still bearish, even though we are kind of moving sideways, and we'll probably eventually roll over back down to go and test this support, which can be a really nice area to look to go long. Again, monitor price action so you can get some nice confirmations and look to target 40,000 after that. But right now, I think Bitcoin is still on its way down, as long as it doesn't start taking out major structures like this level here. If you start pushing on, forming higher highs, then can look to change the bias and see if you can get back above this level and look to go long from there. But right now we are still bearish. So Bitcoin, I'm favoring another leg to the downside back to 30,000, and from there potentially could see a move higher, but right now it's far too bearish for me to expect to see a push unless we get a sudden change of structure. But right now, overly bearish. I'm expecting another move to the downside back to 30,000, and if you hold that, a move back up to 40,000 after that. Okay, so that is the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed that, found that useful. Like always, guys, if you have any questions, agree or disagree with my analysis, just let me know. Drop a comment down below, and I will get back to you guys. But that is the end of the video. Thanks again for watching, and until the next one, I'll catch you guys later.